Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg Television today. President Biden said that the United States would help Ukraine for as long as necessary, but now it seems he's encountered serious difficulties in Congress. Will the United States help Ukraine for as long as it takes?
Absolutely. I think American leadership is here to stay. We've seen the United States take the important leadership role ever since Russia went into Ukraine. We obviously have a temporary situation right now with this continuing resolution that does not include increased support for Ukraine, but based on broad support across Congress for U.S. support for Ukraine, based on what President Biden said when he got on the phone with our allies and with President Zelensky in recent days, and based on what you see in terms of polling across the United States, we anticipate that American support for Ukraine will continue. Americans fundamentally understand what's at stake.
And Ambassador, you mentioned a lot of good points there, but let me pick up on your allies. You had a phone call there, but you do know that behind the scenes there are some concerns from some of your European allies that worry about this election year in the United States. What is your message to some of your European allies who worry about political volatility in the United States?
Well, obviously, we have had some questions across the NATO alliance to better understand our budget process and what's going on with this particular continuing resolution. But I think allies heard loud and clear when they were able to join President Biden in his recent phone call that U.S. support will be ongoing. Irrespective of what happens with our politics, I think Americans understand that Ukrainians aren't just defending their territory right now. It's so much more than that. What Ukrainians are doing is defending not only their own territory, but the values that we all hold dear. They're standing up for sovereignty, they're standing up for democracy, and they're in essence protecting the entire NATO alliance from Russia going any further. So Americans, I think, fundamentally get that point and will want to see the United States continuing to support Ukraine. I will add one more thing, and that is America is not alone in this effort. Over 50 countries around the world are providing security assistance, and even more are providing humanitarian and economic assistance. So America is playing a critical leadership role, but it is not alone in this effort to support Ukraine.
And on that note, we know that President Zelensky is participating at a summit today, and he told reporters that he gets it. He gets that this is an election year in the United States, but he said there are some, quote, strange voices in U.S. politics. Would you say there are strange voices in U.S. politics?
I think we have a small number, both in Congress and across the United States, that have asked some hard questions about U.S. support for Ukraine. But again, if you look at the polling data and look at the large majority of Americans that support Ukraine, or if you have a chance to engage actual members of Congress, you find by and large that there's deep bipartisan support there. I happened to be in Washington last week with the entire North Atlantic Council, which means I brought all the NATO ambassadors, all 31 of them, to Washington. We spent quite a bit of time in the House and the Senate last week, and so many members of Congress came out to express our continued support to our allies for what we are collectively doing in Ukraine. I found that incredibly reassuring, and I think that's why it gives our allies and President Zelensky faith that the U.S. will continue to be there.
And Ambassador, you mentioned a very good point, which is the polling, and you say many Americans do support Ukraine. But what is your message to the Americans who do not support Ukraine, who say, why is my money going to a country that I don't really know much about?
Well, I would say that the United States is not at all directly engaged in this conflict. We do not have any American soldiers on the ground participating. There's no risk to American troops. But for the contributions, the small percentage that we are providing, both in terms of humanitarian, economic, and security assistance to the people of Ukraine, we're getting quite an investment. We are getting a huge huge return on that investment. Ukrainians are using those capabilities to push back and degrade Russian forces. They're pushing the Russians out of their territory. They're sending a strong signal to Moscow that they will not succeed in this endeavor to take over the entire country of Ukraine. And again, they're preventing Russia from going further and touching NATO territory. So this is an incredibly smart investment for the United States to continue making a small contribution to support Ukrainian forces and the Ukrainian people. And again, by and large, I think most Americans fundamentally understand that.
And Ambassador, you say that this is preventing Russia from potentially attacking other NATO countries. As you know, there's critics who say Russia would never attack NATO, that this is about Ukraine for a number of reasons. Do you actually believe that is serious, or is a serious threat that if Russia were to fully invade Ukraine, take over the country, win this war, would they go beyond?
Well, the NATO alliance has something called the strategic concept, which is kind of our guiding light here inside the NATO alliance. And in that document, it says that the NATO alliance is here to do two things and deal with two threats. Number one, we continue to view Russia as a threat to this alliance. So there's no question that the NATO alliance is tuned in to that danger, and we need to protect ourselves from that. And number two, terrorism is the second threat that the NATO allies always work to prepare themselves to address. So yes, Russia's behavior, its rash and unprovoked aggression inside Ukraine, is a demonstration that they continue to be a threat to the global system and the environment across the Euro-Atlantic area. And so NATO allies are obviously quite concerned about that.
And I know I have to let you go, but just two final questions on this. Today, President Zelensky said that he needs a winter plan because he believes that Russia will attack, again, their electricity and their key infrastructure. He said that he will need more air defense and many more weapons from now until the winter. What do you anticipate NATO can provide that is new?
Well, there's kind of a focus for NATO allies in terms of the support that we're providing to Ukraine. Again, NATO isn't providing anything directly to Ukraine, but individual allies are supporting Ukraine. And the focus for the 50 countries that are providing security assistance right now continues to be air defense and ammunition. We're very focused on those 155s, finding additional support for them so that they have the ammunition that they need, and air defense, because of the fact that they need that on the battlefield, but also for the winter. You rightly point out that we've seen the Russians go after civilian infrastructure. That is the tactic that they took last winter. They could very well do that again this winter. And so allies are coming together to work with the Ukrainians to make sure that we can help them harden their critical infrastructure and prevent the Russians from throwing them into darkness and the cold. So all of the countries that will be coming soon to the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which will be held in Brussels here next week, will be very focused not only on their battlefield needs, but also on their winter needs.
And just as a last question, we're also seeing tensions escalate between Serbia and Kosovo. There is a NATO peace force that operates there. Do you have a message for Serbia and President Vučić?
Our message for both Kosovo and Serbia is we would like to see de-escalation. We've had some increased tension in recent weeks and some eruptions, escalations in violence. KFOR has drawn up, the NATO force inside Kosovo has drawn up some of its reserve forces to plus up its presence in the neighborhood. But we're messaging loud and clear that we'd like to see a de-escalation as soon as possible.